Hey guys, Jeff Gray here, Discipleship Pastor at Living Truth Church. And last week, if you remember, we started a sermon series entitled As You Go. And in that sermon series, we're talking about the importance of loving God and loving people as we go. And last week's session was all about the home and how we love God at home. And if you remember, I talked about first, we have to individually, as a part of my home, I have to love God first. And as I love God individually, how it impacts my marriage and it impacts my relationship with my children. But this week we're going to change gears and we're going to move to this idea of as you go, and we're going to talk about the church. And if any place in the world where love should be demonstrated, it should be the church. But as I think through that, I think through what is the church? I think there are some people that have misunderstandings what the church actually is. And so as I think through what is the church, I have to go back to Acts chapter 2, because Acts chapter 2 is the birthplace of the church. And when you read Acts chapter 2, and if you want to take time to stop the video and do that, you go ahead and do that. What I want you to understand as you look at that passage is that Acts chapter 2, it's about the function of the church. In Acts chapter 2, they're not talking about square footage. They're not talking about props. They're not talking about all the stuff. They're talking about a group of people that are unified, and it's filled with examples of what they did, not where they went. So there are really 3 points I'd like to make with you about this idea of church. And the first point is that the church isn't a place, it's a people, right? Just like we talked about in Acts chapter 2. We have to recognize that and realize that if we're going to love God, we've got to love the church, right? The people. Another point I would make would be that if we love God, we've got to love His people. And I think that's where our CPR groups are really good at demonstrating that, because our CPR groups are designed for that very thing. CPR groups are designed for care, prayer, relationship. So I guess as we think through what that looks like, are we doing that well? Are we really handling those 3 areas of our groups? Are we caring for each other? And are we praying for each other? And are we invested in relationships with the people in our group? That also goes to say that there are other people that are in our church that aren't a part of a CPR group. You've got people joining our church practically on a monthly basis, and they need community. So how is your group doing at reaching out to people that are not yet in a CPR group? And the third point I'd like to make is the fact that we should be good stewards of all the ways that God has blessed our church. You know, I recognize Living Truth, even recently, in the way that the church handled the debt for the land. We're a generous people. And that's a blessing, and it's an encouragement, I know, to you as well as to me. And one of the things I realize is good stewards of what God has given us is so important. And I see that happening all the time in the life of our church. I'll give you one example. About a week ago, there were some men needing a place to meet on a Wednesday night. And space, as you know, was limited at the church. And one Wednesday night, I come out of the office and walk across to the worship area, and there's a group of guys that are basically remodeling a closet into a classroom. They needed a place to meet, and they took action, and now they have a place they can meet that's a great classroom and a great utilization of space, and it just demonstrates good stewardship. Sadly, it's those very things that often will even divide the church. People often don't divide over doctrine or theology in the church. They divide over the stuff. They divide over the carpet. They divide over the use of space. They divide over programs. So as I think through this idea of being good stewards of the things that we have at the church, right? Those shouldn't be the things that divide us, right? We love God and love people, then stuff should never be the thing that divides us. So classroom space and specialty area places like the dining hall, the kitchen, the classrooms, those shouldn't be the things that divide us. Those are the things that God has given us. And in those areas and in those places, our hands really should always be open to serve one another, to love one another. right? And I think about how insignificant those things really are in the big scheme of things. And I just have to think, I just have to think when the trumpet sounds and we meet Jesus in the sky, the property at Byram Campbell is not going to budge. The rocking chairs are going to stay. The coffee bar is not going to move. It's going to be us that meets Jesus in the sky. So if there's anything that we prioritize at Living Truth Church, it should be the people. So let's make that our priority as a church. So now if you would, take some time to answer the questions at the end of this video. And then I would ask that you as a group, if you would just begin tonight by praying over our church, praying over our pastors, praying over our staff, praying over our classroom teachers, praying over our families. Just pray for the body at Living Truth. And I'll see you next week.